At the Pentagon, there is a reliable, unconventional metric for extreme overtime military planning, the Pizza Index. Over the past week, massive insider bets on Polymarket have surged alongside it. Individual accounts are staking hundreds of thousands of dollars on an imminent ground invasion of Iran. Corroborating this financial movement, the Defense Department has issued official deployment orders to 50,000 military reservists, staging them directly for the Middle East. Analytically, to reach Tehran from the west, an invading force must cross the Zagros Mountains, a range that allows defenders to utilize drone strikes and artillery from high-altitude cover. Approaching from the east requires crossing vast deserts, placing supply lines at a 1,000-mile disadvantage before even reaching the mountain choke points. With only 50,000 troops currently deployed, attempting to secure a territory of this scale and geography creates a logistics deficit that conventional military doctrine cannot reconcile. The immediate physical consequence of this invasion is the freezing of maritime navigation through the Strait of Hormuz. Shutting down this vital artery severs the energy supply line for allied NATO nations, creating direct diplomatic hostility. A sovereign power rarely initiates a regional conflict that guarantees the destruction of its own global economic alliances. This mobilization functions as a game theory-driven controlled demolition of the current financial system. The goal is to abandon the American global empire and force a hard transition into a self-contained, autarkic resource fortress. This map isolates the Middle East, tracking the export of oil from Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, the UAE, and Kuwait. Removing this region from the board instantly deletes 20% of the world's energy supply, starving heavily dependent zones in Europe and East Asia. The initial energy deficit rapidly triggers an agricultural crisis. The Middle East is a primary exporter of phosphate, ammonium, sulfur, and urea. These are baseline chemical components for nitrogen fertilizer, and without them, European food production collapses. The disruption then moves up the value chain to advanced technology. Restricting the export of helium and sulfuric acid from the Gulf halts the global production of semiconductors and AI hardware. Closing the Strait of Hormuz mathematically starves global supply chains of their energy, their food, and their future computing power. To offset this collapse, the United States is consolidating a strategic perimeter known as the Technet, or Greater North America, stretching from Greenland down to the Panama Canal. Recent aggressive diplomatic postures toward Canada, Mexico, and Denmark over Greenland are deliberate maneuvers to secure this continuous territorial bloc. With the Middle East offline, global demand for resources is forced directly onto the remaining stable landmasses, North America and Russia. This map shows fresh water density. North America and Russia hold massive reserves in deep blue, while Africa, Europe, and the Middle East show vulnerability. Zooming into the Tibetan Plateau reveals Asia's weakness. China controls downstream water flow into India, creating a volatile flashpoint. Over a long enough timeline, geopolitical survival relies entirely on geographic resource density and physical self-sufficiency, not fiat currency. The central vulnerability of the current U.S. economy is a $39 trillion sovereign debt burden, a liability requiring constant, massive infusions of foreign capital. This debt is kept afloat by creditors in Japan, China, and Europe, who continuously purchase U.S. treasuries. These foreign creditor nations possess massive industrial manufacturing capacity, but they are critically starved of domestic natural resources. By eliminating the Middle East's output, North America effectively monopolizes the remaining accessible global energy and fertilizer. Because North America now controls these survival-level commodities, manufacturing nations are trapped. They must continue to finance the U.S. Treasury market to maintain the liquidity of the dollar system they use to buy essential resources. The $39 trillion debt is neutralized because the United States has converted its sovereign liability into a prerequisite for its creditors' physical survival. We can observe the exact same autarkic restructuring currently being executed by Moscow in Ukraine. This chart tracks Russian industrial output. The blue line shows an intentional contraction of civilian industries, crossed by a sharply accelerating pink line representing rapid military and drone industrialization. The philosophical architect of this strategy is Alexander Dugin, outlined in his 1996 text, Foundations of Geopolitics. Dugin's concept of the Third Rome operates on the premise that the unipolar, liberal global order is mathematically destined to collapse. Surviving this collapse requires a prolonged war of attrition. This conflict forges domestic unity through nationalism and religion, forcing the state to build industrial autarky. Russia's objective in Ukraine is not a quick victory over NATO. It is the construction of a self-sufficient fortress economy capable of surviving the incoming global economic crash. The outgoing era of globalization was formally initiated in 1991. This system was built on three pillars: extreme financialization, secular multiculturalism, and a global security apparatus entirely subsidized by the U.S. military. The opposing strategy is designed to actively dismantle those pillars. It replaces them with physical resource extraction, ideological nationalism, and the total abandonment of global security subsidies. The 1991 order required global peace to generate financial wealth. The new order requires global chaos to consolidate physical power. Now, this brings us back to the strategic paradox of an unwinnable ground war in the Middle East. Controlling the remaining energy supply, weaponizing national debt, and prioritizing physical resources over digital finance forms a cohesive mechanism. From the perspective of the old global order, initiating this conflict appears erratic and self-destructive. But if the objective is to survive an inevitable global collapse, deliberately accelerating that collapse while you control the final off-ramp is the most rational game theory move available.